I taught a class this semester in African American women's history, and it's usually upper level class, and there were maybe 20-25 people in the class, and one of the assignments is that you have to do some research using primary material on some aspect of African American women, and one of their options was African American women in education, be it higher education, development of black colleges for women, black women teachers or whatever. And ironically, over half of the students in the class decided they wanted to write on black women in education. And of that half, several of them wrote on Spelman and Bennett. And some of them had never even heard of Bennett before. And what came through was not just how important education was to that generation, but they wrote about, but they also saw how important education has been even to their families or people in their families, the reason why they gravitated to it. And we have been talking about the role of knowledge and the role of education throughout the semester, and or the role of learning, I guess is a better term, not necessarily just book learning, but the whole idea of developing wisdom and the importance of folklore and extended kin and all of that. And it was like all of a sudden it clicked for them. What happens when a community becomes enlightened? What happens when you figure out, and others may have helped you, but you figured out your destiny and then the road to your destiny. And part of that progress has to do with, as Lorraine Hansberg says, each one pulled one. But in that pulling, you also educate them as well. And I started out telling them about the woman I'm writing on, Septima Clark. And one of her major gifts was trying to get black people to pass the literacy test during the civil rights era. And what they realized was, like, and you know this when you see little kids knowing all the words to rap music, they were powerful in memory, even though they couldn't read. So since these were parts of tests that were generally repetitive, part of the first classes learned the section of the Constitution that that particular state would always use. And when they got to the registrar, they were able to just go for broke. Now, who knows what would happen if they changed the paragraph. But by the time the white folks figured out what had happened, black people really had then learned to read. So this whole idea about knowledge and the power of knowledge and what makes other people very skittish about what we learn and how much we know then became almost like an under theme throughout the rest of the semester. And we started talking about not only women who started educational centers, but club women and what they did in terms of education. Black nationalist women like Amy Garvey and what that promoted. The International Council of Women of the Darker Races that were in the 1920s, who were Southern black club women who decided that they wanted to branch out to other women of color. A movement that lasted about 10 years and brought women from all around the world to the South to deal with issues that were important to them, which was what was the number one issue: educating our children. You had women from Haiti and Brazil and Liberia and other places who came to try to figure out, how do we develop classes? How do we develop educational centers for our children? And these black club women in the South, many of them educators, went to places like Haiti, to Cuba, even to Liberia, and helped these women create institutions for their children to learn. Then we started talking about gender in terms of education. How did education become the female institute in terms of teaching, for example? But in looking at that, one of the things we realized was that few job opportunities were available for women. So as a result, most women had to be domestics. And one of the things you ran into being a domestic was the potential of sexual exploitation by the men in the white households. And so in the African American tradition, if anybody went to college, it was the girl. So she would not be exposed to that. So as a result, you then began to have more young ladies who then became interested in places like Spelman and other places that were called institutes. And the major function then becomes preparing missionaries to go to dark and heathen Africa, to educate, to Christianize, to civilize. And this first group of black women who were educated, their pull was between, do I become a missionary or do I stay at home? Spelman was called Spelman Seminary, and many of these earlier places were seminaries. And people like Bethune and others wrestled with this, do I go to Africa, do I stay here? Nanny Helen Barrows, who was Miss Black Baptist Church, says that she realized that we had enough demons here at home to deal with, that we didn't have to go to Africa, that we really had to deal with, especially sexism within the black church. So this brings full circle 2014. Here we are dealing with the same issue all again. The power of educating women. What makes it so threatening to men? What makes it so threatening to those who don't understand the power of knowledge? Or maybe they do, which makes it threatening. What makes it so threatening for a group of young girls who have the potential to not just change themselves and their families, to change their communities, to change the country, to change the whole globe? I mean, you can sit down in 1 second and be connected to people in the most remote areas of the world. And here there are a group of 200, 300 young girls who are progressing at whatever pace they were. And here comes a body of folk using terror in terms of grabbing them and putting them back into some, I don't know, paganistic experience. Education is extremely important. First of all, it empowers you. It empowers you then to be able to be the agent of change in your immediate circle and in your immediate environment. So as a result then, look what happens to 230, 270, let's say 300 families. What happens not just to their immediate parents, but here you have a whole institution burned down and looted and destroyed. Then you have people who've gone into hiding because they don't know what to expect. And now you have the whole world galvanized. But what has happened to, even within the country, many who feel as if the government didn't respond quick enough or more in-depth enough. But what does this say about where Nigeria is in the progression of civilization at this point, you know? But in any case, of course, it is a global movement. Anytime that you have, I heard someone say, if this was a situation where you had young women from the Middle East that had been taken over, the whole world would have been even more immediate in responding. And I don't want to bring the whole color issue into it. But I think what we need to realize is the importance of humanity in saving the globe. And I think maybe as Americans we became a little lax because we have made much progress in terms of women and in terms of gender. And that probably means that it demands more of us to stand up and to be heard. But indeed it is our desire, it is our mission, it is our fervent hope as well as prayer, as well as promoting and pushing the United States to do whatever is necessary in terms of not just bringing our girls back home, but also developing and investing in what their world will be like when they do come back home. What happens to them when they come back? What sort of medical care will they need for who knows what drama they would have already experienced? Who knows where they are already now? They may even be off the continent of Africa. They could be shipped who knows where. But what happens? And what happens if you don't bring them back? What happens if not all of them come back, only a few come back? What does that say to those who are left behind? What does that say to future generations? There is a movement that has started that cannot be stopped. Even if you discover and bring them all back, that still does not resolve the issue of what do we do in handling the global animosity that seems to be there by a few, of course, but whatever that germ that seems to be there that has an issue with black women or has an issue with women who understand that they indeed have a brain.